So hi everyone, my name is Fredrik Appelros. I work as a architect at Sinch. I work within the platform domain there, which builds like the underlying platform for our applications and our APIs. And I'm here to talk about how to not build a platform actually. So if you actually are interested in how to build one, maybe you're in the wrong room. But first I'll talk a little bit about Sinch, my employer. So we are a global communication company powering messaging, voice, and okay, I think we're losing the screen here, and email for businesses everywhere. We actually handle hundreds of billions of transactions every year. And with that many customers that are reliant on us for the communication, it's very important to ensure that these APIs that we have are both reliable and performant. And to achieve this, all our systems, they run in a global API infrastructure in different data centers and cloud regions around the world. And our infrastructure is we're trying to deploy as close to our customers as possible, because we actually have real-time communications, such as active like PSTN legs and stuff like that, to reduce the latency and also to meet local data regulations. And the screen goes away again. And we have redundancy built in everywhere to ensure that we are resilient and highly available. And on top of all that infrastructure, we have both sort of enterprise applications, SMB applications, and APIs. So that infrastructure is the foundation, and then these are the layers at which our customers and developers interact every day. And this is how we turn all that infrastructure into something that people actually experience, which is the way to do communications between businesses and consumers. And the way that we managed to get this portfolio of products is through deliberate growth. So Sinch has acquired a bunch of different companies around the world to strengthen our portfolio. And each one of these brought a different thing to the table, something really valuable to our offering. But they also brought a lot of systems that we needed to connect to. And I think where I entered the story is around here, where it sort of accelerated and took off. So the challenge with having that is that we're bringing together a lot of companies really fast. So you end up with a little bit of everything. You have different tech stacks, you have different platforms, and you even have different definitions of what a platform actually is. And that's really where this story starts. So the challenge of turning all of that into something unified. So naturally, we wanted to fix it. So we set out to do what every company in our situation would do, to build one shared platform. And it sounded fairly simple at first, until we actually tried to do it. So we started by launching a unified web portal and SDKs. And the idea there was that it would make it easier for our customers to get started and consume our products. But it didn't really quite work as we had hoped. I mean, it's a great idea, but it's really hard to keep that consistent when all of the underlying products are unique. So then the next approach was, let's introduce API guidelines. So we did that. We thought it would drive consistency across the different teams. But we didn't have governance, so that sort of quickly fizzled out. Then we started introducing shared systems instead. So we shifted into starting to have shared authentication, shared account models, and real proper things that like new products could actually adopt. And this worked better for us. So this is where we started to feel real partial wins, and especially for new products that were creating new APIs that can build on top of this. And so it went, experiment after experiment, and each of those got us a little bit closer to what a shared platform actually could look like. So after a few years of this, sort of building, experimenting, and sometimes actually rebuilding what we already had, we learned a lot. And we learned particularly about 100 different ways to not build a platform. But no, I won't be able to fit that into this talk this afternoon, so I'm going to focus on a few that taught us the most. So first one, neglecting your internal customers. If you're platform doesn't actually make the lives of the developers easier for your own teams, then you're never going to actually convince anyone to use it. So you really need to think about them as a proper stakeholder, as internal customers. Then this one feels fairly evident, but if you have gone through that sort of acquisition journey that we've had, and you have that many different platforms, that many different networks that need to interconnect, you need to really start thinking about treating your network architecture as something deliberate, not as an afterthought. Because if the systems can't actually connect, then it doesn't matter if people want to adopt it, because they just physically cannot connect. Rolling your own authentication instead of using OAuth or OIDC. This was actually before my time, but we had systems that did that. And, it works until it sort of doesn't, because you need to actually integrate with something. You need to implement SSO and connect systems together. Then having a standards is your friend. So go for the standards. Next up, publishing API guidelines without governance. So again, if you have API guidelines, they're more like a wish list. If you don't have governance processes to follow it up, you're never actually getting anywhere. Letting every team build bespoke solutions to shared problems. If you're on this journey to build a unified platform like we were, you should probably start by ensuring that there aren't 3 other teams building the same thing in parallel. Easier said than done in large organizations. Next up, building first and designing later. It's the opposite of what you should do. If you build first, you publish things, your customers start relying on it, and once it's out, it's live in production, it's not just costly to change, it's basically impossible. You can't just break your customers' integrations. And expecting adoption without guidance. So you can build like the perfect platform, and then you provide no support. Then again, you have an issue of, even though maybe they want to adopt it, they can't because they need documentation. They might need handholding. So you need to be there. You need to allocate enough budget to actually be present and do that. Going live with no clear ownership. So this is a fun one. If you're building something that's shared by different teams, so you're having multiple different products building on your platform, and then you're going into a situation where something actually goes wrong, and it's like in the middle of the night, someone calls in, and you need to know, okay, who do we actually bring in? Do you need to like practice that beforehand? You need to have proper processes around that. You need to have shared insights into how the systems connect and which dashboards to look at. Otherwise, it might just end up being a shouting match over whose metrics are wrong. So then we have assuming that grassroots efforts is enough. When you have a large organization, grassroots effort is great. It's sort of like builds momentum. But if you're really trying to launch a big initiative, you also need executive sponsorship. There's always going to be some time where you're going to need budget approval. So grassroots, great, but not enough. And lastly, changing priorities before the rollout is complete. So maybe you're building this and you're like nearly done, and then you're moving on to the next shiny thing. Not great. We've actually had that where we're like nearly launching one quarter, and then next quarter we're like the same position, nearly launched. When it's done, next quarter, same story. So maybe actually wrap stuff up before moving on to the next thing. But we learned from this. So that was all the things that you should not be doing. But we picked up a few things along the way as well. So let's talk about that, what actually helped. So we learned that progress doesn't really come from big sweeping transformations. It comes from smaller shared foundations that you can build on together. And for us, we began with the basics. So identity, authentication, and rate limiting. These are simple universal needs that every API had in common, and that gave us an immediate way to add value without forcing change. We also learned to design for gradual adoption. So no sort of big bang rewrites, no mandatory infrastructure migrations needed. Because the moment you tell your teams that they need to just drop everything they have and rebuild everything, then you lose them. But the fastest wins for us came from new products. So we, instead of trying to just retrofit all the old ones, we focused on getting all the new API products to start on this shared platform from day one. That helped both them cut time to market and sort of prove the value of what we were doing, and built momentum for this initiative. And finally, governance that actually works. So not just these guidelines or wish lists, but clear standards, early reviews. Try to embed yourself as early on in the design process as possible and shift left. So it's a collaborative effort. And I think we had some comments on this in some of the other keynotes or the QAs for the others talks yesterday. Where they had tried everything, right? They had tried to set guidelines, but they didn't have any governance. And then basically, then you're not in the picture. You're not actually participating in that process. You're just writing documents and throwing them out in the ether. But then they tried the other approach, which was gatekeeping. They had their ivory tower or architects telling people what not to do, and that was, well, not working either. So the key here is really getting involved early before it's too late and be collaborative. So here's some examples of where those sort of shared foundations for us started to show real results. So we introduced unified sign-in and API authentication across multiple different products. So we had one set of credentials and one consistent way to connect. On top of that, we also built a consistent account and resource model so that products could organize data and permissions in the same way. And this gave developers a much clearer and more predictable experience for dealing with the resources in our APIs. We also added flexible authorization. And here, by flexible, I mean having sort of a authorization engine that is flexible enough to create multiple different types of authorization systems, such as Open Policy Agent or OpenFGA. Because if you adopt something like that, you can actually fairly smoothly transition from one legacy model to the next. So you could maybe have a very basic role-based access control system, and you can move into and introduce like an attribute-based access system over time without actually needing to changing very much because it runs on the same system. You can basically emulate whatever you had on top. And then underneath all of this, we built common services like rate limiting and like feature flagging that teams could adopt quickly. And together, all of these layers, they started to form the backbone of what now is starting to feel like a single platform. And all of these efforts are starting to show some results. So we now have 11 of our public APIs. We have way more APIs, but these are the main public productized ones. Live in our developer portal, and that's the most consistent set we've ever had. 6 of those are using our sort of unified authentication model, so giving customers a single way to connect. 3 of our different web applications are moving to something we call Sinch Identity, which is our SSO solution for single sign-on. And we have 4 shared services, which are providing value to teams internally to build faster without having to start from scratch. And this is very early, but we're seeing some real momentum here. And the good thing is that every new product is building on top of this without having to rebuild or reinvent this from scratch. So what have we learned from all of this? Well, first of all, you have to start with a shared definition of what platform is. In a company our size with more than 4,000 employees, everyone has a slightly different idea of what a platform is and what that word actually means. And that creates a lot of confusion fast. So start with like a shared understanding. Secondly, just acknowledge that Conway's law is real. So the way that your teams are structured will directly shape the systems that you're going to end up with. So if your teams are siloed, your APIs are probably going to be siloed as well. Third, actually use developer experience for leverage. And by this, I mean that a better developer experience leads to faster adoption, and that applies both inside your company and outside of your company. And fourth, adoption is earned. You can't really force teams to adopt whatever you build, so you have to win them over by solving their problems. And finally, top-down and grassroots have to meet in the middle. You need executive sponsorship to drive big changes and big initiatives forward, but you also need those local champions who make all of that work day to day. So what's next for us? So what we're doing now is we're introducing, rolling out consistent APIs and error handling across our products so that developers can get the same experience no matter where they start in our product portfolio. And there's also been some interesting talks on this topic throughout these days here, and I know that multiple people have mentioned, for example, these RFCs around HTTP error details and such. So those are good to look into. Next, we're also introducing unified authentication and onboarding end-to-end. So from all the way from our developer portal and then all the way through to production access for the systems. So one sort of seamless flow for all of the different products that we have. We are also investing in better documentation and tooling and design not just for developers, but also increasingly for AI agents. So again, going for making sure that whatever you produce is machine readable. Because what we see is that agents will be increasingly be the ones to integrate and build and integrate towards our platform. And that same clarity that you can use to help a human, you can use to actually help an agent understand and integrate as well. And finally, we're making developer and agentic experience sort of a first-class priority going forward. So that means that we're going to continue to invest in them as core parts of how we actually build products. And the goal of all of this is simple. We want to have one consistent, accessible platform that works equally well for people and agents so that anyone or anything that wants to build on Sinch can do so easily. And if there's one thing I want you to take away from this talk, it is that platforms aren't really built overnight and they're not built by accident. So first, learn from our don'ts, avoid the traps that we fell into so that you can spend your energy where it really counts. Secondly, start with shared primitives. Like start small, and from those small common building blocks that every team can use, those sort of small usefulness it will compound, it will build momentum, and you can actually start getting adoption from there. And third, align early. Try to get that executive sponsorship from the get-go, not after the fact. It's really hard to scale alignment after the fact that everything has diverged. And finally, build with developer experience in mind. Because a great developer experience is how platforms actually get adopted, whether that is by human or agents. So we found about 100 ways not to build a platform, but that was also the route for us to learn how to build the right one. So, yeah, thank you.